one partner in every state and territory, which allows for national collaboration and for us to achieve our conservation goals on a nationwide scale. So our main focus for the partnership is the sustainable collection of native flora in seed banks, just like what Andrew was speaking about. We're also dedicated to seed science and research through things like field surveys and through undertaking germination and viability trials in the lab. Another big part of our work is sharing knowledge through initiatives that allow us to provide information about plants for their protection. And a recent example of that was our launch of the Australian Virtual Seed Bank, which includes a record of every seed collection that we have, as well as all of the associated germination data. So that's publicly available for everybody. And lastly, a much smaller part of our work is use of our germplasm collections, and that's what I'll focus on today. So unfortunately, there's a few things that can limit a seed bank's ability to use the collections, and Andrew's touched on this a little bit, but in the case of something, like a threatened species, sometimes we might only have a small amount of viable seeds, so it's not really an effective source of germplasm for things like restoration and translocations. And while we do our best to secure and study our collected seeds, typically we don't have the capacity to undertake sort of ongoing transplantations back out into the wild as individual seed banks. And where it's been done in the past, it usually requires quite a lot of in-kind support and funding, as well as collaboration with external organisations or a lot of cross-organisational engagement within individual organisations. But where all those limitations have been overcome, our partners have been able to achieve some really amazing conservation outcomes. And I'll give you some examples of those. As Andrew mentioned too, one way that we use our seeds is through seed production areas. And so after the 1920 summer bushfires on Kangaroo Island, the South Australian Seed Conservation Centre created a threatened flora seed production garden, which you can see here on the screen. It has some tailored habitats to mimic the island's natural condition, including things like rocky outcrops, wetland areas and ponds. And key to the success of that initiative was the support that was provided by a bunch of different organisations, including the Nature Conservation Society of South Australia, BioR, and of course us at the partnership. And they're also supported long-term by a local friends group. That seed production area is now home to 60 threatened species, which is no small feat, and it provides future opportunities for seed banking and biodiversity recovery programs on the island for those species. We also use our seeds for developing living collections, often at those botanic gardens where our seed banks are located. So for example, as part of the partnership's Rare Bloom project, many teams at the ANBG in Canberra work together to protect the endangered Omeo storksbill. The National Seed Bank at the gardens collected seed from wild populations and banked it. Then the nursery team developed various germination and propagation methodologies. And then finally, the horticultural team established a living collection at the gardens, and it's now happily blooming there. And that provides an insurance for that species against future threats, and also provides a really important and accessible conservation story for visitors to the gardens. And lastly, I wanted to mention that our collections have also been used for translocation purposes. And this amazing flower that you can see here is the endangered Brussels spider orchid, which is found right here in WA. And I don't want to steal Belinda's thunder, I know she's talking about that later, so I won't go into too much detail about that. But due to the amazing work of the WA Seed Conservation Centre at Kings Park, this endangered species has a really bright future. So just wrapping up, so while many seed banks may be currently limited by their capacity to undertake direct restoration work, these organisations and their really dedicated staff are a key part of the conservation puzzle. They provide really important information and research capacity, helping to advise on-ground management when it happens. And if the resourcing and support is available, there's really clear opportunities to engage in plant conservation actions in the future. Thanks very much for listening. I'm happy to take any questions.